Today we're diving headfirst into one of the most thrilling chapters in drag racing history, an era when speed freaks and engineering rebels completely redefined the game with radical aerodynamic designs. From the sleek innovations of the 60s to the groundbreaking experiments of the 80s, this is a high-octane ride through a period that forever changed the sport. Drag racing. 2 cars, a straight line, and a quarter mile. Simple, right? Well, between the 1960s and the 80s, that simplicity turned into a high-speed battleground where physics, engineering, and pure guts collided. Suddenly, aerodynamics became the secret weapon, challenging the idea that raw horsepower was all that mattered. Innovators in the sport started turning boxy machines into air-piercing bullets, and before long, speed records were dropping like flies. Buckle up, because we're about to dive into the game-changing designs, the mavericks who broke the rules, and the tech leaps that left a permanent mark on drag racing. Back in the early 60s, drag racing was all about brute force. Just slap the biggest engine you could find into a car and hope for the best. Aerodynamics? That was something for planes, not dragsters. Or so they thought. But as speeds climbed and quarter-mile times dropped, things started getting dangerous. Stability became a real concern, especially when races were flying past 200 miles an hour and things got downright sketchy at the top end of the strip. Big Daddy Don Garlits, a legend who took innovation to the next level, would become the poster child for aerodynamic breakthroughs. After a terrifying transmission explosion in 1970 took part of his right foot, Garlits reimagined drag racing with the Swamp Rat 14. He wasn't just interested in fixing the car, he wanted to make it better, faster, and safer. Moving the engine to the back wasn't just about protecting the driver, it fundamentally changed the car's aerodynamics. The new layout allowed for a sleeker, narrower front end, which cut through the air and kept the car stable at high speeds. Skeptics laughed, but when Garlits took the 1971 NHRA Winter Nationals in his revolutionary dragster, nobody was laughing anymore. But Garlits wasn't the only one tinkering with aerodynamics. A few visionaries had already started to toy with the idea. In 1955, Mickey Thompson, one of the wildest minds in motorsports, unveiled the Panorama City Special, an enclosed dragster that smashed the 150-mile-an-hour barrier. That was a first for single-engine dragsters, and it made people sit up and take notice. Thompson's design emphasized reducing air resistance, a concept that was way ahead of its time. Then came 1957's Glass Slipper, built by Ed and Roy Cortopassi from Northern California. This wasn't just a car, it was a showpiece of immaculate craftsmanship, winning the title America's Most Beautiful Competition Car at the 1957 Oakland Roadster Show. Running 168 miles an hour in 1958, this car was a blend of beauty and speed. By 1960, it featured a blower and ran a blistering 8.93 at 172 miles an hour, proving that aerodynamics had more than just aesthetic appeal. Then there was Jocko Johnson's fully enclosed aluminium-bodied dragster in 1959, which debuted with an 8.35-second run, one of the fastest at the time. Johnson's car made it clear to the racing world that aerodynamics wasn't just some fancy idea, it had real, measurable results. By the late 1960s, cars like George Schreiber's 1966 Yellow Fang pushed things even further. The Yellow Fang had an enclosed cockpit and bodywork inspired by aerospace design. Although it initially struggled with handling issues, revisions led to success both in the US and during international tours, particularly in Australia. By this point, drag racing teams were no longer just fiddling with engine power, they were actively collaborating with engineers from the aerospace and automotive industries. Wind tunnel testing, once reserved for airplanes and high-end auto manufacturers, became an essential part of the sport, signaling the dawn of a new era. By the 1970s, aerodynamics was no longer just a novel concept. It was a driving design innovation. Funny cars, with their flip-top fiberglass bodies, were the new canvas for engineers and fabricators to go wild. Few did it better than Don the Snake Prudhomme. who brought out some of the most iconic designs of the decade. In 1971, Prudhomme rolled out his flying wedge top fueler, a radical design built on a 220-inch John Batera chassis and covered by a body from Quinn Eppley and Nye Frank. But it faced handling issues due to the exhaust pipes disrupting airflow. And while the crew tried running the car with funny car style weed burners, it didn't solve the problem. Eventually, Prudhomme abandoned the design after switching to a Kent Fuller dragster in 1972. But the flying wedge lives on as a Hot Wheels toy, becoming a symbol of the era's fearless experimentation. But Prudhomme wasn't done pushing boundaries. His army-backed Monza, with its sloped nose, wide stance and prominent rear wing, became one of the most iconic funny cars of the decade. It wasn't just about looks. The car was meticulously designed to maximize downforce, reduce drag, and maintain stability. The fierce rivalry between Prudhomme and Tom the Mongoose McEwen only fueled more innovation, with both teams constantly searching for that next aerodynamic edge. But innovation didn't stop there. In 1972, Jim Dunn debuted a rear-engine funny car called the Fireman's Quickie 2. The car was radically low and it featured a rear-mounted engine, a setup that had never been tried before in a funny car. While the car faced its share of challenges, it opened the door for other innovations in both weight distribution and aerodynamic efficiency. And let's not forget Lil John Batera, a genius chassis builder who brought monocoque chassis designs to the scene. Instead of relying on a heavy internal frame, the exterior supported the car's load, making for lighter, faster, and sleeker dragsters. His collaborations with Prudhomme led to some of the most competitive and beautiful race cars of the era. By this point, teams weren't just designing cars for the sake of speed, they were designing them to be faster, safer, and more controlled. The push for better aerodynamics wasn't just a trend, it was a necessity for survival in the cutthroat world of professional drag racing. If you want to talk about pushing the limits, you got to talk about streamliners. Those long, sleek, and sometimes downright bizarre dragsters that look more like rocket ships than race cars. Tony Nancy, a legend in hot rodding and drag racing, was known for his wedge-shaped streamliners. These cars weren't just fast, they were works of art. Nancy's designs featured tapered noses and enclosed cockpits, showing that aerodynamics and style could go hand in hand. Then there was Art Afon's with his Green Monster series, which took the streamliner concept to its extreme. These jet-powered dragsters weren't built for practicality, they were built for raw, insane speed. With their elongated bodies and enclosed cockpits, they were designed to handle the massive forces generated by jet propulsion. And although these cars weren't practical for traditional drag racing, they demonstrated the endless possibilities of aerodynamic design. As speeds climbed higher, safety became a pressing issue. Innovators like Jim Deast stepped up to develop specialized parachute systems to slow these high-speed machines, while Bill Simpson created advanced fire suits and helmets that could handle the punishing forces and extreme conditions of streamliner racing. Without these safety measures, the speeds achieved by streamliners might have come at a much higher cost. By the 1980s, drag racing was entering a new phase of aerodynamic experimentation, especially in the top fuel category. Don Garlits was back at it with his Swamp Rat 30, and this time he wasn't messing around. Garlits' Swamp Rat 30 was a testament to how far aerodynamic design had come. He incorporated a lightweight carbon fiber and Kevlar nosepiece, weighing in at just 4 pounds, and topped it off with a glass canopy to reduce wind resistance. It was a far cry from the earlier, boxier designs of the 1960s, and this car was built to slice through the air like a bullet. At the 1986 Gator Nationals, Garlits made history by becoming the first driver to break the 270 mile-an-hour barrier. He took 5 victories that year, cementing his legacy as a top fuel legend. What made this feat even more remarkable was that Garlits achieved those speeds with less horsepower than many of his competitors. His streamlined design proved that aerodynamics could not only match, but surpass raw engine power. However, not all of Garlits' experiments were a roaring success. During a qualifying run at Englishtown, the dragster famously flipped in a dramatic blowover due to front-end lift caused by a lightened fuel load, proof that pushing boundaries always comes with risks. Gary Ormsby's Castrol GTX streamliner also marked the 1980s as a high point for aerodynamic innovation. Ormsby's team went all out, involving engineers from IndyCar and aerospace to create a fully enclosed carbon fiber Kevlar body designed to reduce drag to an absolute minimum. The car featured a fully enclosed engine, a sunken cockpit, and a front spoiler to maximize airflow over the rear tyres. The design was meant to be the ultimate top fueler, but things didn't go as planned. During its debut at the 1986 Winter Nationals, close clearances between the body and engine caused mechanical failures, including a broken magneto that led to ignition failure. And despite its innovative design, the car's complexity made it unreliable, and it only reached one final round that season, losing to Garlits in the very first ever all-streamliner final in Top Fuel history. Next up was Darrell Gwynn with his Budweiser Top Fueler in 1987. Gwynn's car followed the trend of the day, featuring a fully enclosed nose and canopy designed to cut down on drag and increase top-end speed. Like Ormsby's car, it had all the makings of a revolutionary design, but it suffered from being too heavy. Weighing in at over 2,100 pounds, well above the 1,800 pound minimum, the extra weight seriously hampered its performance. Gwynn recognised the limitations almost immediately, and after qualifying in the semi-finals at the Winter Nationals, his team removed the bodywork. Once the car returned to a more traditional design, Gwynn's performance improved drastically. He went on to reset national records and claim several victories that season, proving that while streamliners held potential, they were still prone to performance issues that traditional designs didn't face. And then there was Kenny Bernstein, the king of speed, who took aerodynamics to the next level with his Batmobile Buick Riata funny car. Engineered by the legendary Dale Armstrong, this car pushed the envelope in every way possible. The Batmobile minimized drag and maximized downforce with a futuristic design that included a narrowed front end, cockpit canopy, and an integrated rear wing that looked straight out of a sci-fi movie. The car initially faced challenges with handling, as its radical design wasn't quite what the team expected. But Armstrong wasn't one to give up. The concepts introduced in the Batmobile became staples in funny car design. By the end of the 1980s, aerodynamic innovation had fundamentally changed the landscape of drag racing. Quarter-mile times had dropped dramatically, with speeds approaching the 300-mile-an-hour mark, an unthinkable feat just 2 decades earlier. Aerodynamics not only allowed drivers to push their cars to the absolute limit, but also made the sport safer. Stability at high speeds became less of a gamble and more of a science. Thanks to wind tunnel testing and of course the advancements in materials like carbon fiber. Innovations were relentless, and computational fluid dynamics became just as essential to drag racing as engine tuning. CFD simulations allowed for engineers to optimize airflow over the car's body without having to build multiple prototypes, cutting down both costs and development time. As a result, the sport saw a rapid evolution in car designs through the 1980s, culminating in the ultra-sleek, aerodynamic beast we see today. Aerodynamics didn't just revolutionize drag racing, it rippled out into other motorsports and even the automotive industry. Lessons learned about airflow and downforce management found applications in NASCAR, Formula One, and even passenger car design. Carbon fiber, once an experimental material, became the gold standard for high-performance vehicles, and wind tunnel testing, once the realm of elite motorsports, became a tool used across the automotive world. The wild aerodynamics of drag racing from the 60s through to the 80s weren't just about going fast, they were about redefining what was possible in motorsports. The pioneers who pushed the limits didn't just break records, they rewrote the rules. As we look at today's dragsters, capable of mind-blowing speeds, it's easy to forget that much of their DNA comes from that wild period of experimentation. And if this journey through drag racing history has revved up your engines, don't let the conversation end here. Hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of motorsports. Until next time.